Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'm going to try to build the best possible wildcard draft ahead of FPL Gameweek 5. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video on my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be creating 3 different versions of a wildcard draft ahead of Gameweek 5 that you can choose from. You can take elements of and hopefully build your own perfect wildcard side. I will say that this game week in isolation is not one that I originally targeted for a wildcard, mainly because a lot of the fixtures that hopefully I'm flashing up on screen now for you seem evenly enough contested or tricky enough to predict that it just doesn't have too many standout targetable fixtures to be really attacking for a wildcard this week. However, if team value is a factor, or if you're just completely sick of your side, any week is okay for a wild card. And if you build with a long-term plan in mind, you disregard just one game week's fixtures because wild cards are for the long term. They're not just for one game week. Then you can build a really nice looking wild card that might not look optimal as a team this week, but over a long run will pay dividends. So without further ado, let's take a look at wildcard draft number 1. So first up, draft number 1. I'll probably spend a little bit longer on this draft in particular as we run through each player for the first time. On future sections, there'll be duplicate players, so we won't have to spend quite as long on it. Also, if you did enjoy today's video, it would mean a lot to me if you could just hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content as well, and it would be greatly appreciated. Let's start off with in goal and in defense. In goal, I think I made a draft video last week, and if I made one next week and the week after, it would probably be the same 2 keepers. Raya with Dubravka. Now, Dubravka is that 4 million starting keeper that you can just have on your bench most game weeks. And if you are looking at bench boosting, at least he's a playing keeper, and you just try and pick out a week that Burnley have a decent enough home fixture. But otherwise, he's not taking up any of your budget. And your regular starting keeper would be Raya, starting for Arsenal, which is the best defence in the league over the last few seasons. Okay, granted, the next 2 fixtures are not great on paper, Man City and Newcastle, but with a wildcard, you're looking for a keeper over the long term, and you don't really want to be using transfers on keepers at any point. So I think you just sort of grit your teeth over the next 2 game weeks and say, you know what, not expecting too much from Raya against Man City. Arguably, you could even play Dubravka in game week 5, given they've got Nottingham Forest at home. But then after that, the fixtures over a long period of time are good enough that I would definitely want some Arsenal defensive cover. And he comes in at a cheaper price than Gabriel or Saliba, who would normally be the 2 most secure alternative options to cover off that Arsenal clean sheet. So it saves you a little bit of money there. Now, moving into the back line, what I've gone with here and what I think the genuine meta for this season is going to look like is defenders who get defensive contributions at regular intervals. So 4 out of the 5 here have been very good on the defensive contributions so far. Tarkowski and Senesi both hitting them in 4 out of 4 game weeks. Anderson in 3 out of 4, and Burn has got a very high average for the defensive contributions, but has still hit it in 50% of the matches so far. So you've got that raised floor for all of them, and over a long period of time, that is going to make a massive difference. All 5 of these are playable in pretty much any given game week, and they all play for defences that are pretty good. Newcastle specifically have been incredible at the back so far, and Dan Burn seems like a pretty good entry route into that team. Anderson, again, Fulham defensively for a couple of seasons now have put up good numbers, and at 4.5 million, same with Senesi, who's I think gotten 1 price rise, but they're cheap enough that they do provide very good value for money. And over the long term, the fixtures are good enough, and even in the worst fixtures, you're going to be able to play them. Worst case scenario, of course, you're not looking at playing back 5 every single week, but they're always going to be playable because they're regularly going to hit that extra 2 points. Even in a tough fixture, that floor has been raised. Tarkowski as well just seems like a bit of a cheat code, even at 5.5 million at the moment. And Everton have historically been a very good defense as well. And Romero would be my one slightly different pick here, just because although I don't think he's going to be quite as good on the defensive contributions, I think at 5 million, he still provides plenty of attacking upside. Spurs look like they've really honed in on a strategy that works for their set pieces and their corners. And Romero, very good in the air, very good in and around the box, and gets his shots away, gets headers on goal. And I can see a few more set piece goals coming from him. Also, Spurs fixtures over the next 5-6 game weeks are very good as well. So it's worth targeting them a little bit. If you've got a little bit less than in the bank, Van de Ven is also absolutely fine. But I think if you can afford it, Romero does just have ever so slightly more goal threat. So I prefer him. Overall, I think it's a really strong back five. You can play any single one of these in any given game week. But over the long term, I think those defensive contributions are going to give you a massive helping hand. So moving into my midfield, and the big news on draft number 1 is no room for Mo Salah. And the reason for that is basically because I've put a lot of money into my forward line, and with the bench boost in mind, because I'm not going to presume you've played it just yet, although you might have, in which case you can save money elsewhere. But with that in mind, it's quite nice to spread the funds a little bit. Now, Salah is always going to be a good FPL option, and I do have a draft later on in the video. I think it's draft number 3 that I've managed to have both him and Erling Haaland in the same draft. So if that is interesting to you and you haven't lost faith in Salah just yet, then I would absolutely go and have a look at that at the end of the video as well. However, there is an argument at least for looking at drafts without him, because Erling Haaland is a lot of money and there's a lot that you can do with that saving of about 5 or 6 million by downgrading Salah if he's not going to be as central to everything good Liverpool do. Now, it's worth noting he's got 3 attacking returns in his opening 4 game weeks, so he's still off to a pretty decent start, but the numbers have dropped off a little bit in terms of the underlying data, and he does seem, at least anecdotally, to be playing a little bit wider, maybe a little bit more peripheral to things that Liverpool are doing. But that being said, he's still in my team. He's not a bad option, and there is a wildcard draft later on that I like with him in it as well. Now, the midfielders I have gone with, I still think it's important to have one slightly more expensive midfielder in there. I've gone with Bruno Fernandes in this draft, but I've changed it for the future too. Now, I still really like Bruno Fernandes. Obviously didn't get up to much against Man City, but we've seen already this season that in matches, even where he doesn't necessarily have that much attacking threat from open play, he's still got the penalties, he'll still stay on the pitch, and he'll churn up those defensive contribution points as well. So as frustrating a figure as he can be in FPL, he'll still get the points over a long run. So I think for me, he's a player that I would like to include on a wildcard if I can, but far from essential. And I think there are other options that I will look at in drafts 2 and 3 that you can maybe interchange him with. Moving across, I don't want to overcomplicate things with Semenyo. He's just been in fantastic form. He might even have penalties. I think it's unlikely he keeps them now Kluivert is coming back into the fold. But if Kluivert's off the pitch, he looks like he's second in line. Even without penalties, he looks like a man in very good form at the moment and has taken another step up since last season. Still good value for money at 7.5 as far as I can see, and the fixtures are good enough. Maybe not Newcastle in game week 5 specifically, but over the long run, I wouldn't be creating a wildcard draft without him personally at the moment. Across 2 penalty takers, Ndiaye and Paqueta, both at good price points, both putting up decent underlying numbers so far. Paqueta, especially at under 6 million, is very good value for money for a penalty taker. Now, it's important to note that West Ham have not looked very good so far. But again, a bit of a mini Bruno in a way. If you've got a penalty taker who gets 90 minutes fairly regularly, and he's not got the worst underlying attacking data away from penalties either, I think at sub 6 million, it's a bargain that I'd want to be trying to cash in on a wild card. I understand why others might not be quite so tempted. You could look at putting Reinders there in his position for cheaper. You could also look at Caicedo, who we'll come on to later on. But I think Paqueta, with routes to points, he's obviously a very talented footballer, and he's got penalties as well. So he would be in my consideration, as would Ndiaye. Again, 6.5 million, not a good fixture this week. But over a long term, he's already shown us what he's capable of. He hasn't even had a penalty yet, but he's scored 2 from 4. Everton look like a team on the up right now, and with much better attacking threat than they have done in previous seasons. I think Ndiaye is likely to be able to take advantage of that and make another step up this season. Again, a bit like Semenyo, we know he's a good player, but the underlying data from previous seasons maybe wasn't as good as we wanted it to be. This season, it does look like it's taking a step up. And if Everton are creating more, then he looks like the man that's going to be able to cash in on that from an XG point of view. So I'm very encouraged by him so far this season. I would also look at having him on a wild card. Finally, that Anderson spot, Burnley away in game week 5 and game week 6 against Sunderland as well. Never a bad option to have against promoted clubs, and he will rack up the DEFCON as well. Although it is worth noting, if you've got a little bit of money spare, I've got 0.6 in this draft, you could arguably look at maybe upgrading Anderson to Reinders, who, although doesn't have a good fixture this week, then has Burnley at home in game week 6. So absolutely nothing against maybe mixing up that Anderson spot. You could look at Caicedo as well at the same price, maybe downgrade it to Dewsbury Hall if you're a bit strapped for cash. But I still quite like Anderson, and with 2 promoted clubs in the next 2 game weeks, I think he's fine to include. But again, if you wanted Reinders there, I'd have no problem with that either. So moving into the forward line, lots of money being spent here. Erling Haaland is obviously the marquee player in my lineup at 14.1 million. Arsenal away is about as unlikely as he's ever going to be to score a goal. So not a great week to be wildcarding into him. But again, you're setting up a wildcard for the long term. And over the long term, in the form that he's in right now, he's going to be scoring more often than not. Burnley in game week 6, you do not want to create a wild card right now where you need a transfer to get to him in game week 6, unless you're looking at free hitting. But even so, I think he looks like a player that you just naturally want in your squad week to week. He's putting up 1.5 XG per 90 at the moment. That is better than we've ever really seen him in terms of underlying data. 5 goals in 4 games. I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So yes, he's expensive, but I think given the form he's in, if I was on a wild card, there's just no way I wouldn't be including him right now, even with Arsenal next up. Gyökeres is another player that I'd probably want to save a transfer on. So although the next 2 are not ideal, Man City and Newcastle are good defences, but it does save a transfer just having him now. He's on penalties. He's getting good enough minutes, although he did get brought off early in game week 4. But generally speaking, I expect him to get 80 to 90 most weeks. There's no word on when Saka's going to be back, so he should have no competition for penalties anytime soon. And even when Saka is back, I still expect him to have them. So over the long term, from game week 7 onwards, the fixtures are too good to ignore for me. So Gyökeres, to save a transfer in 2 weeks' time, I think makes sense just to have him from the off. Although if you've banked transfers before game week 5 and you've wildcarded from a position of strength, then maybe you could look at going with an alternative player here and having a transfer booked in for game week 7 when Arsenal's fixtures turn a little bit more positive. But for me, I think he's fine to include on a wildcard. Finally, on to João Pedro. We don't think he's got penalties, especially now Cole Palmer is back in the fray, but he's putting up good underlying data. He's getting very good minutes, and with Delap out for I think 10 to 12 weeks, it's very likely that João Pedro's minutes are going to be bolstered for the entire length of that time. I think he even asked Maresca not to play in game week 4 because he was feeling it a little bit from international duty, but he was deemed too important to be rested, and GU didn't even make the bench as the alternative. So it looks like João Pedro's minutes are pretty secure, and he looks very important to everything Chelsea are doing. They've put up the highest XG in the league at the moment, so going without any Chelsea attacker, for me at least, would be unwise. So I think the balance of Haaland, Gyökeres, João Pedro makes a lot of sense up front. And on a wildcard, I have to say that these are the 3 strikers that immediately jump off the page for me. Okay, so moving on to draft number 2, and this one just has 2 small changes, and it basically centres around trying to include Cole Palmer on a wildcard this game week, rather than booking in a transfer to potentially get to him by about game week 8, when the fixture run really does look pretty positive for Chelsea, until about game week 12. So it saves the transfer, and although the fixtures for the next 3 game weeks don't look amazing for Chelsea, if you look at Cole Palmer's record against both Man United and Brighton in the next 2, it's very strong. So I think including him on a wildcard does make a lot of sense, especially because it does save you from booking in a transfer down the line. Now, there is an argument to suggest that he will be building up a bit of match fitness over the next couple of game weeks, and he might not get 80 to 90 minutes immediately after coming back from injury. But I still think the minutes are going to be strong enough that he makes a sensible inclusion on a wild card. The sacrifice that I've made to include him here is by downgrading one of my defenders. Now, I've chosen Dan Burn at Newcastle, but you could equally choose Romero or Tarkowski, and that would save you enough money to upgrade Bruno to Palmer. But I think Rodon makes a lot of sense as a 4 million defender. Leeds have looked very capable in the defence, and Rodon is picking up defensive contributions at regular intervals as well. So he's a great player to just have on your bench most weeks. You can play him in times of crisis more often than not, and you can also have him in handy for a bench boost when the fixtures align fairly nicely for Leeds, for Burnley at the same time with Dubravka in goal. So I think he makes a lot of sense, and it's a downgrade that I think is worthy when you look at the player that you're bringing in ahead of Bruno Fernandes. But let me know what you think of draft number 2, and let's move on to the all-important draft number 3, where I have found a way of squeezing in Salah alongside Haaland. Okay, so last up, this is a draft with both Salah and Haaland in it, and of course, sacrifices have to be made to make this work, but I still think there is an argument argument to try and have Salah in a draft. He's not just completely fallen off the map in terms of FPL returns. He's gotten 3 in his first 4 game weeks. He's still on penalties. He's still getting 90 minutes. And I just can't imagine a universe in which his data continues to look this poor for the remainder of the season. That being said, as I've mentioned in the first 2 drafts, there are strong arguments to maybe go without him because of what you can build without him in it. And especially if you think that Haaland is most weeks going to be your captain, then it does make sense to look at alternatives without him. But I thought it would be sensible to include a draft here with both of them in so you can make your own decision on whether or not you think that having Salah on a wildcard is still a good choice. So, of course, I've upgraded Cole Palmer to Mo Salah. I've needed 4 extra million to do that. So I've had to make a few downgrades. So the 3 downgrades I've made, straight away, I've downgraded Romero to Van de Ven. I think that's a necessary downgrade that doesn't really cost me that much in terms of expected points. So I've just shaved off 0.5 there and Van de Ven goes into my back line. And I think that's absolutely fine. Another position that I've compromised on is removing Ndai, and I've taken him down to Caicedo. So I now have 2 5.5 million options. Now, Caicedo's a player that will sneak under the radar for a pretty long period of time, I'd imagine. He's scored 2 in 4 so far, but I'd imagine his goal threat would be around about 1 in 10 on average. But even if he did get 1 in 10 across the season, that's 3 or 4 goals, plus defensive contributions so far in 75% of matches. If he continues this sort of run for the rest of the season, just with the defensive contributions, we could be looking at a player at 5.5 million who's hitting about 160, 170 points when you add in a couple of goals here or there. That is very good value for money at 5.5. And even without penalties, I think he will tick along fairly well and probably get close to what Ndai was going to get anyway. So it is a sacrifice. I'd prefer Ndai. But again, that 1 million does go to funding Salah over Cole Palmer. So it might be worth the sacrifice in this team. The final downgrade I have made is a significant one. I needed to still find about 3 million. To do so, I have downgraded Gyökeres in my forward line to Thiago. Now, I'm not particularly loving this, and this is the biggest compromise in this side that has made Salah affordable, but Gyökeres down to Thiago does free me up the funds to have Salah and a little bit spare as well. That 0.5 could be used to upgrade someone else. It could mean that I can keep hold of Romero ahead of Van de Ven, for instance. It could mean that I can upgrade Rodon to a 4.5 option. It could mean a fair few other little tweaks I can make, but there are no 6.5 million strikers that I love. And I think I might as well just go for Thiago for now, especially given that Strand Larsen we don't have a fitness update on. If Strand Larsen was fit for Game Week 5, then I'd probably just spend that 0.5 immediately on upgrading Thiago to Strand Larsen, and he's got a good run of fixtures over the next 5 or 6 game weeks. So let's wait on the fitness for him. But for now, Thiago has had a good start to life in the Premier League this season. 2 goals from the opening 4 game weeks. Brentford fans are very impressed with him. I'm pretty impressed with him as well. He holds up the line well, and I think he will get the odd goal here or there. He won't be getting the sort of returns that Gyökeres gets. In fact, far from it. But I think he is important enough to what Brentford are doing that he'll tick along with 10, maybe 15 goals this season if we're lucky. And at 6 million, I think that's good value for money. And he's also got pretty decent fixtures over the long run as well. So it is a downgrade, but I think it's one that is necessary if you're going to squeeze in both Salah and Haaland. But for me, Haaland makes it into every single draft at the moment. I think he's just been too good to ignore. It's whether or not you then want to sacrifice Salah and have a more rounded 15, or maybe just make a few compromises and squeeze Salah into a wildcard alongside Erling Haaland. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I'd massively appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time as we prepare my team selection ahead of Game Week 5.